The apartment felt different tonight. Emma couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something in the air had shifted. Maybe it was the way the shadows fell across the living room. Or maybe it was just her guilt finally catching up with her. She stood in the doorway, watching her husband Daniel sit motionless on the couch, his eyes fixed on some invisible point in the distance. 3 months. That's how long it had been since he'd really looked at her. 3 months since he'd touched her with anything resembling affection. 3 months of living like strangers under the same roof, their marriage reduced to polite nods and careful navigation around each other's space. "Daniel," she said softly, her voice barely cutting through the silence. He didn't move, didn't acknowledge her presence. It was as if she'd become a ghost in her own home. "Daniel, please." Her voice cracked this time, the weight of the loneliness pressing down on her chest. "Can we talk?" Finally, he turned his head. The look in his eyes made her stomach drop. It wasn't anger she saw there or even sadness. It was something far worse, indifference. Like she was nothing more than furniture he'd grown tired of looking at. "What do you want to talk about, Emma?" His tone was polite. Professional even, as if he were speaking to a colleague rather than the woman he'd promised to love forever. "About us," she said, moving closer, her hands trembling slightly. "About why you've been so distant. Why you don't touch me anymore. Why you barely speak to me. I feel like I'm losing you and I don't understand why." A bitter smile played at the corners of his mouth. "You don't understand why?" "No, I don't." The words burst out of her, desperate and raw. "One day everything was fine and then suddenly you just shut down. You moved into the guest room. You stopped kissing me goodbye in the mornings. You look at me like I'm a stranger. What did I do?" Daniel stood up slowly, setting down the book he hadn't been reading. He walked to the window, his back to her, his shoulders tense beneath his gray sweater. "You really want to have this conversation?" he asked quietly. "Yes. God, yes. I want to know what's going on. I want to fix this. I want my husband back." He laughed then, a hollow sound that sent chills down her spine. When he turned around, his eyes had changed. The indifference was gone, replaced by something sharp and knowing. "Your husband," he repeated slowly. "That's interesting. Because for the past 4 months I've been wondering if you even remembered you had one." Emma's breath caught in her throat. "What are you talking about?" "Don't," he said, holding up a hand. "Don't insult me by playing dumb. We're past that now." Her heart began to race, a sick feeling spreading through her stomach. "Daniel, how long did you think you could hide it, Emma? Did you think I was stupid? That I wouldn't notice the late nights at work? The way you smiled at your phone when you thought I wasn't looking? The new perfume? The sudden need for privacy with your messages?" The room felt like it was tilting. Emma reached for the back of the couch to steady herself. "I can explain." "Can you?" His voice remained calm, controlled, which somehow made it worse. "Can you explain why my wife has been having an affair for 4 months? Why she's been sharing intimate moments with another man while pretending everything was fine at home? I'm genuinely curious what explanation could possibly make sense of that." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. When did I find out?" Daniel moved to the bookshelf, pulling out a manila folder she'd never seen before. 2 weeks after it started. You left your laptop open. Your messages to him were right there on the screen. Last night was amazing. I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again?" He recited the words with the detachment of someone reading a grocery list. But Emma could see the muscle working in his jaw, the only sign of the pain beneath his calm exterior. "I wanted to confront you right then," he continued. "I wanted to scream, to break things, to demand answers. But I didn't. You want to know why?" Emma couldn't speak. She could barely breathe. "Because I wanted to see what you would do. Whether you would come clean, whether guilt would bring you back to me." He opened the folder, revealing printed screenshots, timestamps, evidence of every betrayal meticulously documented. "But you didn't. You just kept going, kept lying, kept sharing yourself with him while coming home to me like nothing was wrong." "Daniel, please." She moved toward him, but he stepped back. "Don't," he said, his voice finally showing a hint of emotion. "Don't touch me. You lost that right." Emma stood frozen, her mind racing to process what was happening. The folder in Daniel's hands felt like a weapon pointed directly at her heart. She wanted to look away, to run, to disappear, but her feet wouldn't move. "You want to know the worst part?" Daniel said, his fingers tracing the edge of the folder. "It wasn't even the affair itself, though God knows that hurt enough. It was watching you lie to my face every single day. Watching you play the role of my concerned wife while you were counting down the hours until you could be with him again. It wasn't like that, Emma whispered, knowing even as she said it how hollow it sounded. No? Daniel opened the folder, pulling out a printed screenshot. March 15th. You told me you had to work late on the Henderson presentation, but according to these messages, you were at the Riverside Hotel with him. Room 412. He pulled out another page. March 22nd. You said you were having drinks with Sarah from accounting, but you were at his apartment, weren't you? Each piece of evidence felt like a physical blow. Emma had been so careful, or so she'd thought. She'd deleted messages, used private browsing, created elaborate cover stories, but somehow he'd known. He'd known all along. How did you... She started, but her voice trailed off. How did I get all this? Daniel's smile was sad. You're not as tech-savvy as you think, Emma. Cloud backups are a wonderful thing. Every message you deleted was right there, synced to your account. Every photo, every plan, every "I love you" you sent to him. All saved, all time-stamped, all undeniable. Emma sank into the armchair, her legs finally giving out. I never said I loved him, she protested weakly. Daniel pulled out another page, his hand steady despite the pain in his eyes. April 3rd, 2:47 a.m. I think I'm falling in love with you. This scares me, but I've never felt this alive. Should I go on? The words hit her like ice water. She remembered that night. She'd typed it in the bathroom while Daniel slept in their bed. The rush of new passion making her reckless, making her stupid. She'd deleted it immediately after sending, but clearly not immediately enough. Daniel, I was confused. I didn't mean... Stop. His voice cut through her excuses. Just stop. I didn't show you this to hear your justifications. I showed you this because you asked me why I don't want you anymore. He walked closer, his eyes boring into hers. You want to know why? Because you already gave away what was mine. The words hung in the air between them, final and devastating. What we had, your loyalty, your honesty, your faithfulness, those things were supposed to be ours, sacred. But you handed them to someone else like they meant nothing. You gave him pieces of yourself that belonged to our marriage, and you can't take that back. It's gone, Emma. We're gone. No, Emma sobbed, standing up and reaching for him. No, it's not gone. We can fix this. I'll end it with him. I'll do whatever you want. Therapy, counseling, anything. Please, Daniel, I made a mistake, but we can get past this. He looked at her hand on his arm, then gently but firmly removed it. A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill or saying the wrong thing in an argument. What you did was a choice. Multiple choices. Hundreds of them, actually. He gestured to the folder. Every message, every lie, every time you touched him, those were all choices. I know I messed up. But I love you. I still love you. Do you? The question was quiet, but it cut deep. Because from where I'm standing, love looks different than this. Love doesn't delete messages at 3 a.m. Love doesn't create fake meetings to spend time with someone else. Love doesn't look me in the eyes and ask, how was your day after spending the afternoon in another man's bed? Emma had no answer. The truth of his words was irrefutable. Daniel walked back to the window, his shoulders sagging slightly. I've been dying inside for months, Emma. Every day pretending I didn't know. Pretending that everything was fine while my world fell apart. Do you have any idea what that's like? To look at the person you love most in the world and see a stranger? To wonder if anything we had was ever real? It was real, Emma insisted desperately. Everything we had was real. This thing with Marcus... Marcus! Daniel's voice was flat. So that's his name. The man who's been sleeping with my wife. Marcus. Emma realized her mistake too late. In her panic, she'd given away information she hadn't meant to share. But what did it matter now? Everything was already out in the open. He was just... She struggled to find words that wouldn't make it worse. He was just what? Just someone to make you feel alive? Just someone who paid attention to you? Just someone who made you feel special? Daniel's calm facade was beginning to crack. Were we not enough, Emma? Was I not enough? No, that's not. You were always enough. This wasn't about you. Wasn't it? He turned to face her fully. Because that's what they always say, isn't it? It's not about you. It's about me. But that's a lie we tell ourselves to avoid the real truth. It was about me. My failure to keep you interested. My failure to make you happy. My failure to... Stop it, Emma said, fresh tears streaming down her face. This is my fault. My weakness. My betrayal. You didn't fail at anything. Then why? The question came out raw, all pretense of calm finally stripped away. If I didn't fail, if this wasn't about me, then why did you do it? Why did you throw away 10 years of marriage? Why did you risk everything we built together? Emma opened her mouth, but no sound came out. How could she explain what she didn't fully understand herself? The excitement, the attention, the way Marcus had made her feel young and desired again. It all sounded so shallow, so meaningless when weighed against what she was losing. I don't know, she finally whispered. I don't have a good answer. At least that's honest. Daniel picked up the folder, holding it like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I'm going to Sarah's parents' cabin. I'll be gone for a week. When I come back, I want you moved out. What? Panic seized Emma's chest. No, Daniel, please. It's over, Emma. It's been over for months. I just needed to hear you say you wanted me. Needed to see if you felt anything at all, and now I have my answer. He walked toward the bedroom, then paused. I hope he was worth it. I really do, because he cost you everything. Emma didn't sleep that night. She couldn't. She lay in the bed she'd shared with Daniel for 10 years, staring at the ceiling as the hours crept past with agonizing slowness. Every creak of the house, every distant sound made her hope he'd come back, that he'd changed his mind, that this nightmare would somehow end. But morning came with only silence. She found a note on the kitchen counter, written in Daniel's careful handwriting. I've transferred next month's rent to the account. Take whatever furniture you want. Keep the dishes, the photos, whatever means something to you. I just want one thing, the truth. Write it down, every detail, every moment, every reason why. Leave it on the table when you go. You owe me that much. Emma's hands shook as she read it. The truth. How could she put into words something she barely understood herself? But she owed him that. She owed him so much more. She called in sick to work and sat at the kitchen table with a blank notebook. For hours she stared at the empty page, pen hovering, trying to figure out where to begin. Finally she started writing. It started at the company retreat in February. Marcus was the guest speaker from the Chicago office, presenting on digital marketing strategies. We were paired together for a workshop exercise. He was charming, funny, easy to talk to. Nothing happened that day, but he asked for my number to discuss work collaboration. Emma paused, remembering that moment. How innocent it had seemed. How she'd felt a small thrill when her phone lit up with his first text. The messages started casual. Work questions, industry articles, harmless jokes. Then one night you were asleep, and I was stressed about the product launch. He texted asking how I was doing. We talked for hours. He listened in a way that made me feel seen. I told myself it was just friendship. The words came faster now, a confession pouring out onto the pages. When he came to town for meetings, we met for coffee, then lunch, then dinner. I told you I was with colleagues, which was technically true, but I left out that it was just the two of us. Each time we met, the conversations got deeper, more personal. He told me about his divorce, his loneliness. I told him about feeling invisible, feeling like I'd lost myself in the routine of life. Emma wiped tears from her cheeks, smudging the ink. The first time we kissed was in the parking garage after a dinner that ran too late. I should have pulled away. I should have stopped it. But I didn't. I kissed him back. And in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Reckless, young, desired. I felt like Emma. Not just your wife, not just the woman who paid bills and did laundry and lived the same day over and over. She wrote about the hotel rooms, the lies, the double life she'd constructed with such careful precision. She wrote about the guilt that gnawed at her after each encounter, and the way she'd pushed it down, rationalized it, told herself it didn't mean anything. I convinced myself I could have both, the security of our marriage and the excitement of the affair. I told myself I was compartmentalizing, that what you didn't know couldn't hurt you. I was wrong about everything. By the afternoon, Emma had filled 20 pages. Her hand cramped, her eyes burned from crying, but she kept writing. Daniel deserved the truth, no matter how ugly it was. Her phone buzzed. Marcus. Hey, beautiful, free tonight? Been missing you? Emma stared at the message, feeling nothing but disgust for him, but mostly for herself. She typed back, it's over. Don't contact me again. Then she blocked his number. It was a small gesture, meaningless in the face of what she'd destroyed, but it was something. She returned to her writing. I don't know when it would have ended if you hadn't found out. That's the most shameful part. I was so deep in the lie that I might have kept going indefinitely. I had convinced myself it was manageable, sustainable. I see now how insane that sounds. As evening fell, Emma wrote about the moment that afternoon when reality had truly hit her. She'd gone to the bedroom to pack, and found herself holding the photo from their wedding day. They looked so young, so hopeful, so completely in love. The woman in that photo would have been horrified by what Emma had become. "You asked me why," she wrote. "I've been thinking about that all day. The real answer isn't Marcus or feeling neglected or any of the surface reasons. The real answer is that I was selfish and cowardly. I was afraid of getting older, of the routine of marriage, of becoming my mother. Comfortable but quietly unhappy. Instead of talking to you about those fears, instead of working on us, I ran towards something that made me feel young again. I chose the easy dopamine hit over the hard work of maintaining what we'd built." Emma filled 30 pages before she finally stopped writing. Her confession was complete, raw, and unfiltered. Every ugly truth, every rationalization, every moment of weakness, all of it laid bare. She walked through the apartment one last time, gathering her things. Most of the furniture they'd bought together, she left. Taking it felt wrong, like stealing. She packed her clothes, her books, a few personal items. Everything else, the life they'd built, she left behind. On her way out, she placed the notebook on the kitchen table, weighted down with her wedding ring. She stood there for a long moment, looking at the simple gold band that had meant forever. Now it just looked like a broken promise. Her phone rang. Her mother. Emma let it go to voicemail. She couldn't face explanations, couldn't endure the disappointment in her mother's voice. That would come later. She loaded her car with the few boxes that contained her life and drove to her sister's apartment across town. Jessica answered the door in pajamas, took one look at Emma's face, and pulled her inside without questions. "He knows," Emma said simply, and broke down completely. Jessica held her while she sobbed, offering no platitudes, no empty reassurances. They both knew this wasn't something that could be fixed with kind words and ice cream. "What are you going to do?" Jessica finally asked when Emma's tears had slowed. "I don't know," Emma admitted. "Find an apartment. Figure out divorce lawyers. Try to survive this. Do you love him, Daniel?" The question hit Emma like a physical blow. "Yes, God, yes, I love him so much. I think I always have. I lost sight of it. I got bored and stupid and selfish, and now I've destroyed the best thing in my life." "Have you tried talking to him? Really talking?" "Maybe." "There's no maybe," Emma cut her off gently. "You didn't see his eyes, Jess. He's done. And he should be. I don't deserve another chance. I don't deserve his forgiveness. I just have to figure out how to live with what I've done." That night, lying on Jessica's couch, Emma couldn't stop replaying the last 3 months. All the signs she'd missed, or more accurately, ignored. The way Daniel had gradually withdrawn, his smiles becoming less frequent, his touches less warm. She'd attributed it to work stress, to the normal ebb and flow of a long marriage. She'd never considered that he knew, that he was quietly suffering while she continued her betrayal. The cruelty of it took her breath away. How must he have felt, watching her get ready for her work events, knowing exactly where she was really going? How had he maintained that calm facade when his world was falling apart? Emma realized she didn't really know her husband at all. She'd thought she'd married someone who would yell, who would fight, who would confront her immediately. Instead, she'd married someone with a quiet strength that made him step back, observe, and make calculated decisions. Someone who loved her enough to hope she'd come back to him, but respected himself enough to let her go when she didn't. She'd underestimated him in every possible way, and now she'd lost him. Daniel stood on the deck of the cabin watching the sun rise over the lake. The water was perfectly still, reflecting the pink and orange sky like glass. It was the kind of morning Emma would have loved. She'd always been an early riser, always the one to wake him up to catch the sunrise. But Emma wasn't here, and she never would be again. He'd read her confession the night before, all 30 pages of it. He'd forced himself to read every word. Even though each sentence felt like a knife twisting deeper, he'd needed to know, needed to understand, needed to hear the truth he'd been imagining for months. Some of it had surprised him. The depth of her self-awareness in the writing contrasted sharply with the thoughtlessness of her actions. She understood what she'd done wrong, could articulate her failures with painful clarity. But understanding and choosing differently were two separate things, and she'd chosen wrong at every opportunity. The part that hurt most wasn't the physical betrayal, though that was agony enough. It was reading about how alive she'd felt with Marcus, how young and reckless and free, because it meant that with Daniel she'd felt the opposite. Dead old, trapped. Their marriage, their life together had become a cage to her. How had he missed it? How had he not seen that the woman he loved was slowly suffocating under the weight of their routine? But even as he asked himself these questions, Daniel knew they were unfair. Marriages required communication. If Emma was unhappy, she should have talked to him. They could have taken a trip, changed their routine, gone to counseling, tried something new. Instead, she'd made the decision to break their vows, to seek excitement in someone else's arms. His phone buzzed. His brother, Ryan. "How are you holding up?" Daniel had told Ryan everything 2 days ago, needing someone to talk to, someone who wouldn't judge. Ryan had been furious on his behalf but had mostly just listened. "I'm okay." Daniel typed back, which was only partially true. "Reading a lot. Thinking a lot. Trying to figure out who I am without her." That was the strangest part of all of this. Daniel had been with Emma for 12 years, married for 10. She'd been his best friend before she became his wife. Every major decision he'd made in the last decade had been made with her in mind. Now he had to learn to think as a single person again, to make choices based only on what he wanted. It felt both liberating and terrifying. "Come stay with us when you get back," Ryan texted. "The guest room's ready. You shouldn't be alone right now." Daniel appreciated the offer, but he wasn't ready for his brother's family, for the sympathetic looks and careful conversations. He wasn't ready to be the object of pity. He spent the day hiking the trails around the cabin, pushing his body until his muscles ached and his mind quieted. Physical exhaustion was easier to deal with than emotional pain. In motion, he could almost forget. Almost. But when he returned to the cabin that evening, tired and sweaty, the silence hit him again. This was his life now, coming home to empty rooms, making dinner for one, no one to share his day with, no one to laugh at his terrible jokes, no one to curl up with on the couch. He'd taken his wedding ring off the morning he left. It sat on the bathroom counter at home, next to where Emma's now rested. 2 golden circles that had once represented forever, now just metal. Daniel's lawyer had sent the preliminary divorce papers. "Standard no-fault divorce," she'd explained. "Illinois doesn't require proof of adultery for dissolution. We'll aim for a clean split. You keep the apartment since you can afford it on your own. She takes her car, you divide the savings account. Should be straightforward since there are no kids involved." No kids. That had been a plan for someday, when they were more settled, when they'd traveled more, when the timing was right. Now Daniel felt a complicated mixture of relief and grief about it. Relief that there were no children who'd have to live through their parents' divorce. Grief for the future he'd imagined but would never have. On his 4th night at the cabin, Daniel finally let himself cry. Really cry. Not the silent tears he'd shed alone in the guest room for months, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal. He cried for the marriage he'd lost, for the woman he'd loved who'd become a stranger, for the future that had been stolen, for the trust that could never be repaired. He cried until he was empty. And then, in that emptiness, he found something unexpected: clarity. This wasn't just about Emma's betrayal. It was about his own complicity in the slow death of their marriage. He'd gotten comfortable too, had stopped trying, had let their relationship slip into autopilot. He'd assumed that love was enough, that the foundation they'd built would sustain them without maintenance. He'd been wrong. Daniel couldn't control what Emma had done, but he could control what he did next. He could choose to let this destroy him, to become bitter and closed off, to let her betrayal define the rest of his life. Or he could choose differently. He could choose to learn from this, to understand that relationships required active participation, constant communication, intentional effort, to recognize the warning signs he'd missed this time so he'd never miss them again. To emerge from this not as a victim, but as someone who'd survived something terrible and come out stronger. It wouldn't be easy. The pain was still raw, still overwhelming at times. But sitting there on the deck, watching the stars emerge one by one, Daniel made a promise to himself. He would heal. He would grow. He would become the kind of man who could look back on this chapter of his life and see it as a turning point, rather than an ending. He picked up his phone and texted his brother. I'll take that guest room. Give me a few more days here, then I'm ready to come back. Ryan's response was immediate. We'll be here. Love you, brother. Daniel smiled for the first time in days. His marriage was over, his heart was broken, but he wasn't alone. He had family, friends, a career he loved, interests he'd neglected. He had himself, and maybe for now that was enough. He thought about Emma, wondered if she was okay, if she was staying with her sister, if she'd found an apartment yet. Part of him wanted to reach out to make sure she was safe, but he knew that wasn't his responsibility anymore. She'd have to find her own way through this just as he was finding his. Daniel went inside and pulled out his own notebook. If Emma could write her truth, he could write his. He needed to process what had happened, to make sense of the chaos of emotions swirling inside him. Dear Emma, he began, though he knew he'd never send it. You asked me why I don't want you anymore. Here's the real answer, the one I couldn't say when you were standing in front of me. He wrote until dawn, pouring out everything he'd held inside for months. The pain, the anger, the betrayal, but also the love that still existed despite everything. The memories of who they'd been before this broke them. The grief for what could have been. And in writing it, he began to let it go. 3 months later, Daniel stood in the doorway of his apartment. No longer their apartment, just his. He'd rearranged the furniture, painted the bedroom navy blue, hung new artwork. The photos of him and Emma were packed away. Not destroyed, but no longer displayed. The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago. 10 years of marriage dissolved in 15 minutes at the courthouse. The first month had been brutal. He'd thrown himself into work, avoided being alone, spent every evening at his brother Ryan's house. But gradually the sharp pain had dulled to an ache he could live with. He'd started therapy, joined a cycling club, reconnected with old friends. His life was different now, but it was his. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Daniel, it's Emma. I know I shouldn't reach out, but I wanted you to know. Marcus and I aren't together. We never really were. It fell apart within weeks. I destroyed our marriage for nothing. I'm so sorry. You deserved better. I hope you're doing okay. Daniel stared at the message for a long time. Learning that her affair had amounted to nothing should have felt like vindication. Instead, it just felt sad. He understood what she was trying to say. That she hadn't left him for Marcus, that it had been about her own brokenness. But it didn't change anything. The betrayal was the same, he typed carefully. I appreciate you telling me. I'm doing okay. I hope you're finding your way too. Take care of yourself. Polite. Distant. Final. The kind of message you'd send to an acquaintance, not the person who'd once been your whole world. Emma's response came quickly. Thank you for being kind even now. You always were the better person. I'll leave you alone now. Goodbye, Daniel. Goodbye, Emma. Daniel set his phone down and walked to the window. The city stretched out before him, full of life and possibility. Somewhere out there, Emma was starting over too. They'd both carry what happened for the rest of their lives, but they'd carry it separately now. His doorbell rang. Sarah from his photography class picking him up for a gallery opening. She was smart, funny, easy to be around. Nothing romantic yet, he wasn't ready, but her friendship had been a lifeline. Ready? She asked when he opened the door. Yeah, Daniel said, grabbing his jacket. Let's go. As they drove downtown, Sarah asked about his weekend plans. Daniel realized he had options. A cycling trip, Ryan's birthday party, a photography workshop. His life wasn't empty anymore. It was different, but it was full. At the gallery, surrounded by stunning black and white photographs, Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not closure, grief didn't end cleanly, but acceptance. He could acknowledge that his marriage had been real and meaningful, even though it ended badly. He'd loved Emma deeply while recognizing she'd been capable of tremendous cruelty. He thought about his words to her that night. You already gave away what was mine. It was true. She'd given away trust, intimacy, the belief they were a team. Those things were gone forever, but she hadn't taken everything. She hadn't taken his capacity to love again, his ability to trust someday, his sense of self-worth. Those things he'd protected and somehow kept intact. Emma had broken his heart, but she hadn't broken him. There was a difference. As he studied a photograph of a building's shadow stretching across an empty street, Daniel understood his new reality, learning to find beauty in the aftermath, to see possibility in empty spaces. The shadow was as much a part of the image as the light. Sarah appeared beside him. "What do you think?" "I think," Daniel said slowly, "that endings and beginnings look more similar than we realize." "It's all about perspective," she smiled. "That's very photographer of you." Daniel laughed, a real laugh that surprised him. When had he last laughed like that? He couldn't remember, and maybe that was okay. Maybe not remembering the last time meant he was ready for the next time. They left the gallery as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Daniel felt the evening breeze on his face and realized something profound. He was going to be okay. Not today, maybe not tomorrow, but eventually. The wound would scar, but scars meant healing. They meant survival. His phone stayed silent in his pocket. Emma wouldn't text again. That goodbye had been final, and Daniel was grateful for it. Not because he hated her, but because they both needed to move forward separately. "Coffee?" Sarah asked, pointing to a cafe across the street. "Sure," Daniel said. "I've got time." He did have time. Time to heal, time to grow, time to figure out who he was as a single man again. Time to make new,